It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Folks over at Public Citizen, they have come out and called, well, for accountability at Boeing. You may remember back in 2019, you had some crashes, cost 346 people their lives. You had this door thing that's going on, panels flying. You've got all this stuff that's going on. And, it got me thinking that, for the last 30, 40 years, we've been talking about, corporate policing and deregulation and all of that stuff and the wonders that deregulation would bring us. Now, my conservative friends have lectured me for years about how, we need to deregulate because, it allows business to have flexibility and they can innovate and they can do all this stuff. They can move at the speed of business because, regulations are cumbersome and they cost job-killing regulations, we hear. And that how, by deregulating, we're going to give corporations the ability to operate at the speed of business and that you're going to have efficiencies that will, turn into better practices. And you got the industry expertise because they know stuff that those regulators don't. Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons. We can have tailored solutions so that corporations can develop their regulations themselves, not through the long, cumbersome process of government. And then they could promote their own kind of common regulations among themselves in the industry. The industry would police itself. And of course, we're told that there's mass accountability because eventually you can sue them. The only problem is the 346 people who are dead. I don't know what they get out of a suit. I'm not quite sure. And the millions of people who suffer because of corporate malfeasance, because we didn't regulate. Again, corporations, who police themselves, not all bad actors. Look, but like anybody who's ever driven on the highway when there are no policemen there, you're going to go faster and cut corners. Because you're going to put profit over people. And ultimately, that's what this is about. Because the downside of deregulating is it's a massive conflict of interest. This idea of putting the public ahead of your radical self-interest, putting your neighbors and your families ahead of more for me and the heck of with everybody else. We know in areas that have been deregulated, there's a massive lack of accountability because there isn't a cop on the beat. And if there is, he's overworked or she's overworked. And well, I look at OSHA. The one statistic I saw said for OSHA to inspect every workplace in this country would take like 144 years. And this is what corporate America knows. And the problem with deregulations is it is a massive risk to we the people. Reducing safety standards in food and transportation and healthcare puts people at risk. Now, I've had a lot of people say, well, this is the FAA's fault, that what's going on at Boeing. You go, you mean the one that we've defunded over the last 40 years? The one that we said, no, we're not going to police Boeing. They're going to do it to themselves because they know stuff, right? And again, I go back to this short-term thinking of profit now. Quarterly profits are more important than long-term, quality. And that's not just big corporations, everybody in this moment. And you think about the damage that's been done. You think about the companies that need regulating the most are the ones that are damn near monopolies. Those are the ones not mom and pops. Yeah, they may cut a corner, but I don't know that they're killing 346 people. You throw on top of that the worker exploitation that comes out of this, the financial instability. I've said before, I've worked for companies that just the threat of, hey, I'm going to call OSHA or I'm going to call the EPA or I'm going to call somebody made them rethink what they were going to do. For instance, I worked for a company years ago, a warehouse company, where they had a lot of forklifts, a lot of oil, And they didn't know what to do with it. So they told the low-level maintenance guy, just go dump that oil out in the back. And one of the stewards on the job, because the maintenance people weren't unionized, but the workers were, one of the stewards going, hey, what are you doing? Well, they told me to go drop this out in the back. He said, no, you're not dumping that out in the back. That's stupid. And he threatened to call the EPA. He threatened to call somebody, call the union, anybody, and make aware that they were going to do this. And it saved the company what would have been a massive cleanup bill. It saved the local environment because eventually they keep doing it enough, it becomes a problem. And this is where I keep coming back to, it's been pounded into our head, job killing regulation, but not the people killing lack of regulation. Not the environmental destroying lack of regulation. And this has been, 40 years of conservative thought in the making. Corporations will police themselves. They're going to do what's in the best interest. And you go, of who? Oh, yeah, of the corporation. And in the best interest of the corporation is what? More profit. Because it's not about building widgets or planes or flipping burgers. It's about how much money are you going to put into your pocket? How much do the shareholders put in their pockets? And how much can we cheat workers out of? That, my friends, that's where this is at. So when we come back, we're going to talk to Rick Claypool, research director over at Public Citizen, to get some of his thoughts on, how do we hold corporate America accountable in this era of lack of regulation, in this era of let the corporations police themselves. And if you've got any stories, I want to hear them. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. It's amazing we are here. I'm shocked often that we as working people have bought it, but here we are. Quick break, right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about this idea of holding corporations accountable, because again, we were sold this idea, if we just let them police themselves, if we just deregulated enough, it was going to be fabulous. Just like the whole privatization argument. If we just do it enough, then maybe those benefits will come to fruition. But for me, the fact that Public Citizen has come out and said that, you know what, the company Boeing has got to be held criminally accountable. That to me is kind of a big deal because we don't often think of, locking up the guy in the white shirt in the corner office, the CEOs or the shareholders or anyone when you're talking about corporate malfeasance. But here to share some thoughts on why this call and maybe walk us through what is going on with Boeing and what's going on and going forward, maybe how, if someone gets locked up, why. I've asked Rick Claypool to come talk with us. He's a research director at Public Citizen, citizen.org, the website, if you want to check out their work. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick. Happy to be here.
So walk me through this call for corporate accountability. How cute in this day and age, since we've seemed to have given it away. Why this case?
Well, this is, Boeing is an extraordinary example because, the recent door plug failure of, Alaska Airlines, from the Boeing manufacturer plane, was sort of a wake up call to everyone just realizing, about what can really go wrong inside these machines. And this is not, people too often think of, white collar crime or corporate crime as something that's victimless, or it only is going to affect, somebody shuffling paper around because they all through some accounting gimmick, somebody got paid more than they ought to. This really means a lot for actual public safety and just the need for reliable air travel, in this country and all over the world. And the failure happened really within days of the expiration of Boeing's leniency agreement for the misconduct around the just tragic plane crashes in 2018 and 2019, which were caused by a failure of the MCAS sort of technology, sort of an autopilot system. Then the scandal surrounding that, 346 people tragically died in those crashes. Yes. And, that the way that federal prosecutors and law enforcement chose to handle that was just disgraceful at the time. What many big corporations receive, and Boeing was one of them, this is how it worked out, are instead of whenever they break the law, instead of being prosecuted and having to plead guilty or go to court and plead their case, before a judge or jury, they negotiate these leniency agreements called deferred prosecution agreements or non-prosecution agreements. Basically, what it is, it says if you promise that you're gonna not commit any more crimes, you'll pay a fine. You'll have to do make some internal reforms. We'll just, after 3 years, we'll just wipe your slate clean. It'll be like nothing ever happened in terms of your criminal record. Now, this was a system that was sort of originally imagined to help low-level nonviolent offenders to basically keep a person from getting caught up into in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, an 18-year-old caught with a little pot. Don't do it again.
Exactly.
Not someone who's not a giant corporation whose errors or inactions cost people their lives. I don't think that's the actual intent of that idea.
No, we might want to hold the most sort of powerful organizations in our society to a higher standard, especially whenever when they break the law, it can cause so much harm. So this agreement, there was a particularly disgraceful one. Like I said, 346 people were killed in these crashes. They could have been charged with 346 counts of manslaughter, right? It's sort of what happened with BP, with its when the
Valdez,
when the Deepwater Horizon explosion in 2010, they were charged for manslaughter for all the workers who were killed there. What Boeing was charged for, the charge that wasn't really charged and is sort of like mentioned in this agreement, and it'll get sort of wiped clean if it's found worthy of having that done, was a single count of fraud against the government, and for hiding this sort of MCAS system from the FAA. And when families of the victims of the crime, the people who died in the crash, tried to get some accountability and some say in this, the Justice Department actually argued that they were not the victims of this crime as it was construed.
That's odd.
Yeah, it was completely upside down, nonsensical. This particular agreement, it could have been scandalous. As it happened, the Justice Department dropped it on January 7th, 2021. You might remember some things that happened on January 6th of that year were more front of mind for everyone. So,
no, let me ask you, stop right there then. Conspiratorial, or was that's just how it worked out?
Well, it's not uncommon for a lot of these sort of corporate crime resolutions to just kind of get finished up at the end of an administration or the end, and so that.
Okay, so you're arguing this is it just happened that way. I don't want to leave it hanging out there that this is some grand conspiracy. Because look, there's nothing I'd like more than to go, no, the Trump administration certainly scandalously went after and did this, but or did they?
Well, here's the thing, but the Trump administration did have some, their general policy in terms of corporate enforcement was to bend over backwards to make sure that, that corporate offenders did not face the full consequences of their crimes.
Yeah, Rick, that's the Republican Party mindset. This is how we've gotten 40 years of deregulation, how we've gotten 40 years of attacking government and giving all of this power to corporate America, and of course, not jailing anyone. So am I surprised that during a Republican administration they were much, much more lenient than they would be during a Democratic administration? No.
Yeah, it was very fascinating too in the context, of course, the ongoing chants of law and order, and the insistence that the law is the law, and then when they're just having DAs prosecute immigrants and protesters and what have you, that they're just enforcing the law as if they're just enforcing the law on all fronts. Where if we were following corporate and white collar crime, it clearly was not the case.
No, and this is. Let me ask you this, because we talk about you guys are calling for some accountability and for this company to be criminally liable. How do you lock up a corporation? I mean, ultimately, I've been saying for a very, very long time, nothing changes on any level until the guy sitting up in the corner office is given a new set of bracelets, a new outfit, and a residence at the Gray Bar Hotel. But how do you lock up or hold accountable a corporation? How would you want Boeing held accountable in this situation?
Well, the first thing is, if Boeing is found to have committed crimes or breached its agreement, which it seems that's what the Justice Department is investigating. That's what we asked them to investigate in February, and now they're the people who were on that Alaska Airlines plane and the flight attendants and employees on that plane. They've received notice from the FBI that they may be victims of a crime. So we see that there's a different approach happening right now.
And that's because is that because of a different administration? I just want to be clear on where we are. Is it different leadership at these organizations? What's the cause for now doing something and maybe not doing something back in 2019?
Sure. Well, here's the thing. So there definitely, obviously, was an administration change, and there for sure have been policy changes. So when the Biden administration's Justice Department took the helm, they had some really strong rhetoric about how they were going to be turning the corner and holding corporate offenders accountable. A lot of that tough talk really didn't pan out in terms of the number of companies getting prosecuted under the Biden administration. They're starting to turn that around. But the one place where there was a noticeable shift was that previously, and this has been a thing in the past, it's been bipartisan, both the Republican and Democratic presidents, is that when companies violated these agreements that avoid prosecution, the agreements say that the companies will be prosecuted for the offenses. They almost never were until the Biden administration. They did start holding companies accountable for breaches. So Monsanto was prosecuted for one of those. NatWest was. That's the sort of the rebranded Royal Bank of Scotland. Both of those were under such deals. Both of them were actually prosecuted for that. So that's a good sign. This Boeing situation is the big test. The Justice Department has until June.
One of those J months.
One of the J months for sure. It's June. It's 6 months from January to decide whether Boeing abided by its agreement. If they decide it didn't, they can prosecute Boeing. This is according to the language in the agreement, for any crime that they are aware of. This means the current misconduct. This means that fraud count that the company was charged with. They can charge for that. It also means that if Justice Department really wants to stand up and signal and hold Boeing accountable, they can prosecute. They can bring those manslaughter charges. Those 346 people who died in those crashes. Now, what does that accountability look like? Well, for starters, we see if there are individuals who need to be held accountable, who are responsible, they for sure should be held responsible. And the Justice Department is very big on saying over and over again that culpable individuals are the top priority. What can't be allowed to happen is that those culpable individuals can become a scapegoat for systemic problems within the corporation itself. A corporation with a systemically corrupt culture is going to be criminogenic. It's going to, if the incentives are such that the financial and accounting preferences and things that lead to maximized profits, if that is seen as more important than making products that are safe and not breaking the law, that's going to create the wrong incentives, and people will fear their bosses who want them to make the product faster versus the law that wants them to make it right and safe.
So if I'm getting this right, this could turn into potentially into a feeding frenzy of people turning on each other, basically the rats jumping ship to save their own behind, and it could just be everyone turning on everyone else and nobody really being held accountable except for saying, oh, it was a corrupt environment. Is that what I'm getting from you?
No. So I guess worst case scenarios are possible, but we also, I guess the important thing would be for both culpable individuals and the company itself to be held accountable.
Okay.
Now, so instead of it being the simplest way, when I say it's prosecuted, so that means instead of having one of these leniency agreements, which whether it followed the deal, that is purely between the business's corporate lawyers and the prosecutors, and we, the public, have no sort of window into how that is determined, whether they followed the deal. If they're prosecuted, the company can be placed on probation and have to be monitored like an individual on probation and have to report. And if they fail to meet up to their obligations in their plea agreement, if they plead guilty or are found guilty, then they can be found in breach of that, but not quietly behind closed doors, but before a judge in a court of law.
Right. And what does that accountability look like? I mean, I asked it a second ago. Who goes to jail? Is there a corporate death penalty? Because ultimately, there's got to be something here that people fear, other than just maybe a handful of people fall on the sword. I see the CEO left the company. Is he the guy they lock up? I want to see people with real accountability and real consequences sitting behind real bars, if this be the case. Not just sign this letter that promises you won't do it again.
Exactly.
That's my problem with all of this, from labor law to corporate law to all of this. It's always continue to break the law, and then when you get caught, get a slap on the wrist and post the notice that you won't do it ever again until you do.
And I'd be, it's true that a company like Boeing, which is practically a monopoly in terms of U.S. aerospace manufacturing, poses some really unique challenges in this space. But I can give a couple examples of sort of recent that can sort of you can start to think about what this accountability can look like. So one example of is it was last year, a generic drug manufacturer, Teva, was had an enforcement action against it. It wasn't prosecuted. It got one of these, leniency deals. But part of that, which was particularly powerful, is that the agreement sort of forced it to spin off the line of business that it was making its ill-gotten gains from. So it's okay. You're going to be breaking the law in this context here. I believe it was like cholesterol drugs, things like that. You don't get to sell these cholesterol drugs anymore. So you just spin it off, and another company can take that on. That's been shown to, it puts a fear in businesses that if they have a profitable line of business, they don't want it to lose it. And it also has shown that that's a clean way of introducing new management. A similar case happened with the BP refinery that exploded in Texas, a decade or so ago. That got sold to new management, and they introduced a much safer work culture.
No. So last question I've got for you: if you're laying odds, what are the chances of anything happening in here, or does this? What are the chances of anything happening if you're a betting man?
Well, I don't want to. If they find evidence of criminal misconduct, I think there will be some subsequent action from the Justice Department. Will it be enough? Will it hold individuals and the company accountable both? Those are the big questions. I saw, the CEO is, resigning, and the head of the commercial airlines division, just sort of abruptly retired today. Those are the kinds of things that companies do when they're trying to really show, look at us, we're cooperating, we're changing things. Please, don't throw the book at us.
No, we're covering our behinds. No, I got it. Maybe that's a good sign. But Rick, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. I look forward to talking to you again as this progresses down the road. But I'm hoping for some accountability. Thanks so much.
Same. Thank you. Cheers.
Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Do you think these agreements should exist, or is it just another example of the wealthy and the powerful getting away with whatever they want while it's the little guy who's always held accountable? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So our quote of the day comes from Donald Trump at a press conference on Monday. Quote, "You can't have an election in the middle of a political season." I don't know. But hey, remember, it's Joe Biden who's old. It's Joe Biden who says dumb things. Yeah. Well, yeah. Although you got to give Trump credit, had an interesting couple of days over the weekend. He tweeted out, "It has been my great honor to be at Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach tonight. Awards night," he saw Truth Socials, "to receive the club championship trophy and the senior club championship trophy. I won both." Bold letters. "A large and golfing talented membership, a great and difficult course, made the play very exciting. The qualifying and match play was amazing. A large and distinguished group will be there tonight. Very exciting. Thank you." This, I gotta tell you, this grabbed me. This is kind of Kim Jong-il stuff. Remember Kim Jong-il? Had 18 holes in one the first time he played golf, bowled a 300 game the first time he bowled. I mean, he was a mythical godlike person. Trump, on his own course with the membership there, won all the awards, everything. And this is kind of in in that world. And again, one of those things that grabs my attention and says, this is going to be the new America. We have a dear leader. And you have to bequeath the dear leader with awards. Lots of awards. Shower him with praise and awards and award ceremonies. And look, I said this back in 2015, 2016, that the way you handle this guy is you shower him with all of the accolades and how wonderful and how smart and how talented and all of it, and try and get what you want out of him. I always thought the Democrats should have gone a different tact. Give him whatever he wants. Rose garden ceremonies all the time. Yeah, but we want collective bargaining rights. Huge parties. Yeah, we need infrastructure. You're the smartest, most incredible president ever. Here, do this, and we'll give you a big party. We'll give you a little, gold trinket. Serious. And on Monday, a lucky day for Trump. You got the judge who took the money that he needed to secure the bond from something like $450 million down to $175 million, and pulled off one of the great bribery schemes in the history of American politics, when his Truth Social, this app that I know very few people use, but somehow merged. They had this IPO, that closed. The DWAC shares closed at almost $50, 185% increase since the start of the year. Trump owns about 58% of that. His stake in the company, almost $4 billion. On Tuesday, it's supposed to start under the DJT ticker, so you'll be able to follow how this tanks over the next 6 months, or over the next year. I think he has to wait a couple months before he can sell the shares. But this makes him one of the top 500 richest people on the planet, because a crummy app that nobody uses did an IPO, and now you have Trump almost $4 billion richer. And it got me to thinking, because we've been hearing this frame from the Republicans, from Katie Britt, the night of the State of the Union response, to what was her name? Elise Stefanik. There have been a lot of people. Well, we're better off. Marco Rubio, things are so much better. 4 years ago, the country was safer, more prosperous. Never mind the morgue trucks that were parked outside of hospitals. Never mind everyone being locked in their homes. Never mind the shutdown that occurred under his watch. Never mind the almost 1 million people who lost their lives because they bungled the pandemic response. Never mind all that. Never mind. Everything was great. Outside of that, and never mind the economy that he picked up that was doing very well. Never mind the massive amounts of deficit spending that they did to heat up the economy. But never mind that. Outside of all that, it was great. It was amazing. It was the best ever. And you ask the average person, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And we've been trained to go, no, we're so much worse off now. Wages are up. Unemployment's down. Things seem to be moving in the right direction. We're reshoring manufacturing. We're investing in infrastructure. We've got almost an industrial policy. There's so much to be optimistic about. But we're sold the pessimism, and I get that for the working people because milk still is. I think it was like $3.50 a gallon the other day when I went to go buy it, and it was like $2 a gallon back then. My wages are much higher now, but never mind. It's more money coming out of your pocket. But I saw this piece done by the folks over at inequality.org, and they looked at the billionaires because you go, well, who is doing better today than they did 4 years ago? And the one group that can, without question, say that they are so much better off today than they were 4 years ago is our billionaire class. Because as the folks over at inequality.org point out, rich people saw their wealth, our billionaires saw their wealth go up 88% in 4 years. Did your wealth go up 88% in 4 years? Did your income go up that much? Did your total wealth of your household go up that much? No. In fact, they looked at Forbes, survey of their billionaires, the 34th annual survey of the billionaire class. The data that they released March 18th, 2020, right around the time the pandemic going problems. On that day, we had 614 billionaires who owned a combined wealth of about $2.9 trillion. Not poor, but, got a ways to go. 4 years later, March 18th, 2024, 4 years later, we have 737 billionaires. Thank you very much, pandemic. For a combined wealth, sit down for this, $5.529 trillion, an 88% increase. And you go, but I'm told that they're taxed out of no. Our billionaire classes, they don't pay that much in income tax because they don't have income. Most of their stuff is stock related, and they borrow against that and then pay the meager interest to bankers who give them really good deals because it's secure, and they live high off the hog without paying tax. And a lot of their income is passive income, again, taxed very differently than work income. And I was just having this conversation. How is it in a country of working people, when you figure the general number is about 65% of the people in this country are working class? That definition of you punch a clock, you collect a check at the end of the week, and, well, that check never goes far enough. But how is it that 65% of the people are classified as working class, and yet we don't have tax policies that say, you know what, if the hardest day's work you're doing is moving money from one pocket to another, and you're getting all this passive income from, overcharging people for rents and all kinds of other things, schemes and gimmicks and things that they've got out there, maybe you should pay higher taxes than the person who's out there swinging a hammer or driving a truck or taking care of the elderly or our children. Maybe, just a thought, maybe that income should be taxed differently on the higher side instead of differently on the much, much lower side. Maybe just a thought. But we don't do that. And they point out in this piece that, the only billionaire who was on the 2020 list here in the U.S. To see their wealth actually decline was Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, who was literally giving money away. And in fact, I remember at the time them saying she's giving it away so fast that how's it go? She couldn't give it away fast enough to lose money. At the time, the stock market was doing really, really well, and she wasn't, the machine wasn't just giving out millions and millions of dollars, but just not fast enough. She was still actually making money. So in the 4 years from March 18th, 2020 till March 18th, 2024, her wealth went down from 36 billion all the way down there to 35.4 billion. And she's literally giving away millions and millions and millions of dollars. She can't give it away fast enough. And still, that massive drop from 36 down to 35.4. And you go, how is it possible we don't have a system in place to make sure that work is rewarded? Now remember, the Trump tax cuts changed again, and in a major pendulum swing, again made passive income, business income prioritized over work income. You working stiffs, you're going to pay more as a percentage of your income because that's just how it's going to be. And it's amazing to me in a world where all we hear from the right is talk about freedom and liberty. And I go, you know, what could bring freedom and liberty more than economic security? They have literally stolen our freedom to be able to put food on the table, a roof over the head, retire with dignity and respect, have the security of financial security. They've taken that, and they've given it to themselves. And you go, but Rick, you know, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because, again, we keep voting on the dumb stuff. And I had this conversation this week. I don't care about who goes to what bathroom. I don't care who's shaving in one bathroom or the other. I don't care, what people do within the confines of their four walls, as long as it doesn't affect anyone else. You know, go do your thing. God bless you. Life, liberty, pursuit of your happiness. And for me, where we should be 100% focused is on the economic side, the real freedom side. Because guess what? You don't have freedom or liberty without the ability to take a day off from work, without the ability to weather a storm if someone gets sick, to weather the storm if, hey, you get laid off. I know a guy, I'm not going to call him a friend, an acquaintance. I know a guy who worked, I'm not going to say which company because I don't want to out him, worked at a unionized company and decided that, you know, the management offered him a job. Hey, why don't you come over to our side of the fence and become a supervisor, a manager, and, you know, we'll train you, you'll do all this stuff. So he gave up a really lucrative gig as a union worker and became a management worker. And you know, had he come to me before he did that, I'd go, you know, there's some downsides to that. The downside is you're going to give up the security and the job security that you had as a union member to where you're a just cause employee. You got to do something wrong to get fired, as opposed to an at-will employee where we just felt like getting rid of you. I would have told him to think long and hard about that. Well, you know, at the beginning of the year, they exercised their right to at-will this person, and he's out of a job and no way to go back, and now concerned about losing everything because not going to be able to make the kind of money that he was used to making. And, you know, for me, how we solve a lot of these problems and how his problem would be solved if there were more union jobs out there. And I don't know if you saw the piece over at Axios, but they came out with a piece just the other day that said, you know, there's a big wealth gap between union workers and non-union workers. And that is true. And they go through the incomes by household, you know, people who were not high school educated. They said the median income for non-union, non-high school graduates was like $22,000, $23,000 for a union worker in without a high school education, $69,000. And that's because they've got a skill generally. Households who were, had heads or spouses who have a college degree or higher, the median income for the family then was like $460,000 for the non-union households with a college degree, but $533,000 for union households. Which, you go through and you look at the fact that there is a massive difference, especially when you're talking about the kind of wealth that's being created. As they point out, typically union workers make, 10, 20%, somewhere in that range. It used to be like 30% more in their pockets than non-union workers. But this wealth gap, this massive wealth gap, keeps accruing. And they point out that, the numbers are just mind-blowing. Where, the average or the median wealth of a non-union worker in this country across all demographics was like a little under 200,000. But for that of a union worker, it was like almost 340,000. A massive difference. Union workers had, much higher rates of home ownership, 71% to 65%. 60% of union workers have defined benefit pensions, only 24% in the non-union group. The reality is the unions do a great job of ensuring that workers get a share of the wealth that their labor creates. And it's interesting to me that we haven't figured that out. You know who's figured that out? The wealthy. They don't want to share. And they're going to do everything that they can possibly do to fend off people's ability to join and form unions to get some of that wealth. Why? Because it's theirs. This is the part that I'm struggling with. And this idea of freedom and liberty, it for me comes back down to the paycheck. I'm a union supporter because I've seen what it's done for me. I don't know that, given an at-will employment situation, making, considerably less than I make now with crummy benefits, I would be anywhere near where I am personally in my life without that union card. And I can bring, people, groups of people after groups on here telling the same story. And union workers realize that they are fortunate. But it comes back to the messaging machine that the wealth class of this country has built to convince you and everyone else and working people that no, you don't need representation. You don't need a contract. You don't need to know what the books look like. And this is the part that always cracks me up. Because I had a guy, not too long ago, tell me, I'll make my own deal. I'll negotiate for myself. And I go, well, let me ask you this. What are you worth? How do you know what you're worth? Do you get to see the company's books? Do you get to see, what the real numbers are? Or are you guessing? Are you just walking around in the dark? And the answer is just walking around in the dark. Because he's not sitting across the table from the accountants. He's not looking at the actual books. He's not going, I get paid $20 an hour, but I'm producing 300. Maybe I'd like a little more of a little better cut. Obviously not 300, but a little more. And what's interesting to me is people undervalue their time. And that's across the board. For me, how we figure out how to level the playing field a little bit is we make unions great again. We bring collective bargaining back in a huge way so that when we have billionaire owners like Jeff Bezos, who saw his wealth over 4 years go from 113 billion to 192 billion, or Elon Musk, whose wealth went from 24 billion to 188 billion, maybe some of that gets shared and it trickles down to everyone else. Maybe they sprinkle it down on those workers at Tesla or at Amazon who are actually doing the work and actually creating the products and creating the wealth. Maybe, I'm just throwing it out there as maybe we should think about it. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. That's quite remarkable to me. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1910. That was the day that Congress expanded the Immigration Act passed just 3 years earlier. The new language prohibited criminals, paupers, anarchists, and diseased people from entering the nation. During the first decade of the 20th century, some 9 million immigrants arrived on the shores of the United States. Many of these newcomers were from Eastern and Southern Europe. By 1910, 14.5% of the people residing in the United States were foreign-born. The numbers were even higher in the industrialized areas of the North and Midwest. Many leaders in organized labor worried what this large influx of immigrant labor would do to the U.S. labor market. They were fearful that the new workers would drive down wages and impede unionization efforts. Newspapers often used derogatory and disparaging language to describe the Southern and Eastern European immigrants. Public anti-immigrant sentiment continued to grow. In 1924, Congress then passed an even more restrictive Immigration Act. That year, American Federation of Labor President Samuel Gompers wrote a letter to Congress urging them to restrict immigration. He wrote, quote, "Shutting out from our shores the poor of other nations and races is caused by the law of necessity and self-protection consequent upon our industrial system. Labor does not desire to erect a wall around our country and prevent the poor of other nations from entering. It does not declare that America is for America alone, but it does insist that there should be and must be some restriction of immigration that will prevent disintegration of American economic standards. Debates over immigration and its impact on American labor continue to be hot-button political topics."
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Minnesota. What are you doing, Minnesota? You got a state senator guy named Warren Limer. I think it's Limer, Limmer, Limer. Republican from Maple Grove. He says that safe storage, gun storage laws are bad. We can't have those trigger locks or the gun safes or any of that stuff. No. Safe storage laws are bad because it's going to stop farmers from protecting their families against the cows. Evidently, the cows are organizing. The cows are going to, it got me thinking about my kid's favorite book, a good union book. For any of my friends who want to promote good union values, Click, Clack, Moo, Cows Who Type is a fabulous, fabulous book. But it got me thinking about cows organizing. In the Click, Clack, Moo kind of a theory that all the cows would come and, Farmer Brown would have to give them, decent living conditions and some decent food and, maybe not slaughter them. But according to this guy, the cows must be organizing because he says that they would have to, farmers have to protect themselves from the cows. He said, even if you walk too close to a cow and it'll take you down and trample you into the dust, because the cows are coming. Yeah, the cows. Because, of course, a farmer, and this is the part that just blows my mind, a farmer is just going to go out and just start shooting cows. It just makes, if you remember, though, there were other people, who was it? Maybe it was Sarah Palin or someone like that, talking about shooting bears. That you got bear in the backyard. It was one of the arguments that the schools had against barring guns. Never mind. That's where my mind went. Because the bear, they come to school. Yeah, we are in such a weird place. It's remarkable. Now I'm not a gun grabber. I'm not an anti-gun guy. I do think that responsibility is the answer. I think if you're careless with a firearm, someone should be held accountable. Much like we saw in Michigan, that was the right outcome. The parents gave this kid a gun. The kid went out and he shot a bunch of people at school, murdered a bunch of people at school. They tried, convicted, going to spend a good portion of their life in prison. That to me is the right path. That's the path forward. That's how we make sure that maybe the next family goes, you know what, I'm going to give my kid, this weapon without any restraint, without any restrictions, without any oversight. Here, go ahead. Go do what you're going to do. It seems really irresponsible. And this is something, again, I guess I'm just older. I guess I'm old now because I used to remember a Republican Party that believed in responsibility. I used to know Republican voters who talked about responsibility and accountability. And I know it was all a show back then, and it was always about responsibility and accountability for everyone else but them. I get it. So save the emails. But I used to remember that at least being a talking point, something that they claimed they believed in. Now there's no facade at all. There's it's nothing. So, when I see dumb stuff like a state senator, saying, we can't protect ourselves from the cows if we have to lock up the guns, it just makes me go, I think you're crazy. You may have had a point, but there it went. I'm curious, and I do this occasionally, of the audience. How many people are in favor of there being some technology to ensure that guns don't fall into the wrong hands? Trigger locks, the fingerprint verifications. I've heard that there's, you put your finger on the trigger and it better be yours or someone that's programmed in there, or it won't go off. There's a lot of that. There are ways that we could solve our problems. The question is will we? And I look at Congress. I mean, the sad reality, there's a possibility, and this is the weird thing. There is a possibility that, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but there's a possibility that Congress could flip in the middle of a legislative session. It's amazing. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. And as always, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.